Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optage Marketing Professor and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. Today, I'm really excited for our very special guest, Stacey Piefer. She is a senior career development specialist for the graduate team at the Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. And as most of you know, that's where I went to school and also still teach there. And that's where I know Stacey from. So really exciting that she's here. As the senior career development specialist, Stacey guides and supports people and businesses as they navigate a world where competition is fierce, but the end game is worth the fight. Before she moved to helping students, she had over 20 years of work in corporate branding, business communications, consulting, and strategy. Finally, she's an aspiring writer and working hard to have a published work within the near future, and I'm really excited for that. Today, we're going to talk about mentorship, personal branding, and authenticity in marketing. How are you?
I'm doing well, Danny. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to get started and talking about these topics that are all really, I really have a lot of passion about mentoring others and being a mentor and having been mentored myself. So I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts.
Super. And it's been so cool to see your, transformation. So just to let listeners know, so I know Stacey because often we were put on a panel at the University of Houston, where we would speak to really large marketing classes and give them sort of a sneak peek into the world of marketing. And, often Stacey and I were on the same panel, and that's how I originally met her. And, when she was working in the corporate world, and it makes so much sense that now she's actually at the university and helping people. So it really is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Danny. I was thinking about that today, how long we've known each other. And it feels like it hasn't been that long. And then I actually counted the years, and it's been nearly 9 years since you and I have met and have been working together and interacting with each other. So it's been a minute. And I speaking of mentors, it's so funny when you cross paths with people along the way in your career journey, how even if it's just for a moment in time, it's easy to find and learn from others. So, and you're one of those people that I've learned so much from. So this is a fun conversation to have with you.
Cool. Thank you. I can't believe it's been 9 years. It feels like it's been shorter, but time does move quickly. So Stacey, let's turn back the clocks. Where did you go to school and what did you study?
Yeah. So I am an alumnus of the University of Houston. Before it was Valenti, I did graduate from the College of Communications with a degree in communications and public relations. And that's really where I got my start. But funny fact is that even before that, I started my career in broadcast journalism. And that really, even though I did not pursue broadcast journalism, that really set me up. Just that 2 years experience of being in broadcast so beautifully set up my career trajectory in a way that I had no idea would come into play. So I really have had a metamorphosis through this career journey, starting in my education, to look back and see how that has impacted my career moving forward to where I am today. So, and I got so much out of my time at U of H and being in such a diverse environment with so many diverse people and so many diverse members of faculty who impacted my career trajectory. So that's where I started and brings me here today. It's full circle because I'm back where I started my collegiate career. So that's exciting to give back to the school for sure.
Can you think of any experiences or stories, both inside and outside the classroom, that were impactful in directing your path? Like when you can look back today and think of anything.
I actually started out a couple of semesters at junior college. And because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was very fortunate to live. I originally come from Alvin, and Alvin Community College had this amazing radio station and broadcast degree. And so I started my first couple semesters there. And what I found out is that I was actually really good at broadcast journalism. I was really comfortable in front of the camera. I was really comfortable being in my own skin. And I had some feedback from local news reporters saying, you're really good at this, which was impactful to me in making me feel really confident from a very early age of a potential career. And it also scared the heck out of me because it was kind of the first time when you're a freshman in college, you're 18 years old, and someone says to you, wow, you could do this and make a career out of it. It was kind of this moment of like, well, that's really cool. And then you turn around and think, well, that's terrifying because now all of a sudden I'm 18 and I have a career in front of me. So that feels weird. Even though I knew I was pretty good at it, I also knew I didn't want to do it long term. So seeing and hearing from these people who were, icons, especially in the local media market, kind of pick you out of the crowd, and then going through that feeling of saying, I don't really know that this is right for me, though, long term, was an interesting way of really kind of navigating through conflict at a very early age and navigating through like career conflict at a really early age. So I was grateful to have that feedback. And then at the same time, I was also grateful of it kind of pushing me at a very early age to say, step back, take an assessment, and figure out, is this something that you really want to do? And thankfully, I found out really early on it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do more of the business and the strategy side of communications, which is what led me into U of H, is being able to get that really hardcore business / communication strategy down and pursue that line. So from a very, very early part of my career, in my academic career, I had this experience that where I really thought I was going one way, and then it completely shifted in a totally different way, which again kind of brings me where I am today, kind of going through that stage of where I've been and where I'm going.
I imagine going from like a junior college to like the big campus of U of H was, a transition. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I was born and raised in Alvin, Texas. So kind of having that moment of feeling like I really want to get out and going to the big city, so to speak, even though it's only 40 minutes away, was a tremendous experience because, again, going back to the diversity of the campus, Alvin's small, it's only 14,000 people. And a lot of the students who I graduated from high school with, they did go on to UT, A&M, Sam Houston. They at least left the area. And for a moment, it did kind of feel like I was being left behind and that I made the wrong choice in having to, kind of took a step back to figure out things academically before I moved forward. But I always knew, especially that Houston was the place that I wanted to be because of, I knew it was going to open up my world for me. And you're 100% correct. Walking onto campus for the first time ever was a little bit of this overwhelming experience, but I also knew from day one at orientation, this is where I wanted to be because I looked around the room and there were students who looked completely opposite of me and they were in opposite colleges and they had different career goals and they had different aspirations and different life experiences. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew that's what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And I also knew I wanted to do it in a large metropolitan market. I didn't want to do it in just a college town, so to speak. So I think having that access to the city was a huge impact for me and feeling like I was in the middle of it all coming to campus for the first time. And that's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect recipe. Stacey, how would you define a mentor?
I think that the definition of mentor is really, really broad. And I actually give people permission and the empowerment to define it in the way that you feel like you're most impactful to someone's life. If it's for a moment in time or if it's long term. For myself, I feel like mentoring is a combination of a couple of things. First of all, I think it is just being kind. Kindness is free. And it really is impactful for someone. You see someone and you offer them a smile. You say, hey, how's it going today? It could change their world. So something as simple as a kind personal greeting is a way to just make someone feel like that they matter. And I think a mentor, really their role is making people feel like that they matter, that there is room for them to take time to help develop and grow someone. I also think another word for mentor is influencer. I think in today's world, we use that term influencer as like, wear this necklace and go buy it. But, I think we've forgotten how important it is to influence others and to really carry yourself in a way that others feel that they can emulate that, or that they can help ask questions. How did you get where you're at? Why do you do this? How important is it to you to do that? I think that mentorship is so much about being an influencer in a way that makes a difference for people. And then my third definition of a mentor is really less of teacher and more of a person who is available just as a listening, a soundboard. Sometimes in this world, especially, I know it's very different for when I was 18, 19, 20 in college than it is now. And I think sometimes you just need, our students, especially in young professionals, just need someone to say, is this normal? Is this something that makes sense to you? I feel this way. Is this normal? Or am I the only person who's going through this? So I feel like a soundboard is another term for a mentor, where you can just be that person to say, let me give you a different point of view, or let me help you think about it in this way, or let me suggest to you, you learn from this experience and take it from this perspective, as opposed to just taking it in the moment. I think a lot of times we need to have someone just from a third party say, let me give you a different point of view and a different perspective. I tell students all the time, I'm like, you know what? I'm not the repository for all knowledge, but here is a path that you can consider. Here is something for you to consider, and then make your own choices and judgment.
That trio of definitions was really good. I want to just dig a little bit deeper into the second one, because I think it's something we may have touched on before, but not really. But I feel like, the concept of an influencer and having that responsibility, right? It's kind of like lots of people are mentors and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
And you are an influencer, and you are, people are watching you. And, it's important to keep that in mind. And you don't realize how you can affect people, both in a positive and negative way. I just think that's something important that we all have to remember.
Absolutely. And I encourage my students now. You can tell the students who are right for that position of influencer, and they're not always the loudest voice in the room. They're not always the person who is going to be the extrovert. They don't have to be. They can impact in other ways. And I feel like I take my role as a mentor very seriously as well, because I want to make sure that I'm setting an example, and I'm setting a role model example for either professionals or students to say, this is an option for you to consider how you want to show up in this world, not only in the workplace, but in your personal space as well. How do you want to show up? I think that's the biggest thing that I impress upon our students, and I push on our students, is saying, how do you want to show up in this world? And really think about that. This isn't about professional success. This is about personal success as well. And I feel like that's where that influencer piece of it really comes in. Is that this is about how you personally want to show up in this world. And, like it or not, we bring our whole selves to work every day. We don't just bring that professional side, we bring our whole selves. And you have to determine, how do you want to show up in order to be a whole person inside and outside the office.
Do you feel like a career specialist has to be a mentor in order to be successful? Or do you feel like some people just do the job like within the box and maybe don't go out a little bit further? And I'm not saying you to throw any colleagues under the bus, but I'm just wondering, like, what do you think about that?
I think by virtue of this position, you are a mentor. I think that it's impossible not to be a mentor in this position. I know here on the graduate team here in Bauer, we all have a different way that we approach our students. And with that being said, we also all learn from each other about how to approach students. I mean, there have been times where you have a student who comes in and you're just not gelling with them. It's just like there's something that's not quite working, but there's somebody else who has a different approach and it works beautifully for them. And there's no pride of ownership here. It's like we want to get our students in the place that they need to be successful. And if that means it's not, I'm not someone's bag, that's okay. We learn from each other and we also rely on each other. And I think by virtue of this position, we all mentor students in a way that might be different from each other. I mean, I sometimes tend to be a little too like rah rah and yay yay enthusiastic, and there are some students who are like, "You're too much for me, lady. Like, I don't know that I can deal with this any longer." So so they tend to prefer someone who's a little bit more low key, and that's okay. I totally get that. So I think by virtue of this position, we have to be a mentor. I don't care if you're here at the University of Houston or you're at UCLA or the University of Texas or, the Ohio State University. I think that if you're in this position, you are automatically playing the role of mentor in some way, shape.
So now let's dig into some of the mentors that have been influential in your life. I know there are two former colleagues who were instrumental in shifting your path from PR to branding.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I and Danny, you've heard this story a couple of times based on our history of being on our panel together. When I graduated from U of H, I went into public relations. I went in thinking PR was one thing and got into it, and it was something a little bit different than what I was really hoping for. And I wasn't one of these people who was like, oh, PR, that's being a party planner for all the big corporate parties. I didn't have that mindset, but it had that aspect of media relations and working with the press and working kind of in these conditions that I wasn't ready for. And to be quite honest, I did not enjoy working with the media. I just didn't enjoy it. Even though my entire collegiate career was focused on doing something in the media communications world, I did not enjoy working with media. It just wasn't for me. And I had the virtue of working for an agency that was based out of New York. It originally was called Bernard Hodis Group, and then it went to Hodis, went through a rebrand, went to Hodis. Our specialty was employer branding and recruitment marketing and recruitment communications and employer choice cultural development. And that's really where I started moving into my branding part and the marketing part of my career. But I went into Hodis as a PR person. I met these two gentlemen who ran the employer branding practice within Hodis, Mark Hornig and Paul Ostermuel. They were two very opposite gentlemen. They kind of were one of them was very laid back and the other one was a little higher strung. One had this vast knowledge of history and he was a totally history nerd, self-admitted. The other one was super into music, and they were from the same generation. They were very similar in age. And I talked to both of them, and I said, "Look, I am not feeling this PR thing any longer, and I really want to start pivoting my career. Can the two of you help me break into this branding world and help me learn what branding is?" And it was almost like the first time the two of them sounded identical and they just immediately said, "Yes, of course. How do we help?" From that point forward, they were great in helping bring me into projects that they were working on. I wasn't even in a position where I was working a little bit overtime because I just wanted to learn at what they were doing and how they were doing it and what are the questions that they ask and what's the heart of branding and how does it connect to marketing. And it was the two of them that really kind of brought me along and would, call me if it's been a couple of weeks and say, "How are things going? Have you had a chance to work on any other projects? Do you need me to pull you into something else?" Or one of them would just say, "Hey, I saw this article. I thought you'd be interested in it. Take a look at it. Let's set up a time to talk about it." And it was great having these two people who I felt like really took me under their wing. In a way, they molded my career in a way that I don't even think today they have any idea of how impactful it was.
Well, we're going to have to share this episode with them.
I actually am. I was thinking about that. I was like, I'm going to have to, send this to them and just let them know how it was my experience with the two of them that really kind of set me on the path of where I am today. And I look back on it and I wouldn't change it for the world of learning at the heels of these two very influential men within that organization and, really just their kindness and saying, "Yeah, I'll go out of my way 100%. You call me, I'll call you. We keep up with each other and let's get you where you want to go." And after working with them, my next natural step was outside of this kind of multidimensional agency and going into a very specialized branding agency, which is what brought me back to Houston and working at Savage Brands, being a brand strategist. So it really was, it wasn't just like, what do I do? How do I approach this, or what do I do with this topic? It really was life changing, and being able to learn from two people who had very vast experience and then also very diverse experience, and two somewhat diverse ways of approaching brand and marketing issues. So that was great to learn from them from that perspective as well.
So, talk about branding. We're going to now move into personal branding. So, really interesting. The first line in your About section on LinkedIn is the definition of a guide. To quote, a guide is a person who guides, especially one hired to guide travelers, tourists, hunters, etc. To many, a guide is a much more organic, human feeling title than career coach. Why did you feel that was the first word you wanted associated with you?
So I love that question, because that brings me to kind of this metamorphosis of my career, the next chapter. When I started working at Savage Brands, they were embarking on this journey of developing an agency that was focused on purposeful brand building and working with companies who were interested in defining what their purpose is beyond building shareholder value. A lot of people have heard of conscious capitalism movement and have read Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And Savage was, and still is, very much, kind of steeped in this idea of building purposeful brands. And as an employee, we also had to kind of learn how our purpose made a difference. When I first started, we went through this process with Jackie Dryden, who is the architect and the chief purpose officer of Savage. And you sit down with Jackie and you go through this series of questions, and it's a quasi therapy session. It really is. And everybody told me before I went in and did mine when I started, they were like, you could laugh, you could cry. It's a lot. It's really a lot of self-assessment. And we went through the process. I was kind of like, okay. And we went through the process, and the first word that Jackie came up with for me was express. And I was like, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be something bigger and better than the word express. I was like, I don't even know what that means. And I ruminated on it. I kid you not, Danny. I ruminated on the word express for like 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And I was like, I can kind of see where it might fit my purpose, but not really. And finally, I called Jackie and I said, is it weird that I don't really connect with my purpose word? And she said, no, it's not. She said, what are you feeling? And I said, well, express isn't even a word that I use often. I don't know what it means. And so she said, let's go through it again. So we went through this purpose exercise again. And by the end of it, she said, your purpose word is guide. And I said, oh my gosh, you're right. It is guide. And I said, what? I said, why didn't I get there the first place? And she said, it's because you focused not on why you do what you do. You focus on what you do, communication, expression, marketing. She said, you were so stuck in the what you do, you could not get into why you did it. And when I had that aha, that epiphany moment, I thought, yeah, it is. My purpose in this world is to guide others. And whether that is a Fortune 500 company, or whether that is a graduate student who is changing a career and is not exactly sure that they're doing what they should be doing, my role in this world is to guide others. And it is certainly a word that I feel connected with. And it's a role that I feel connected with. I feel connected to being a guide. If you want to get really flowery about it, almost like you feel like a Sherpa sometimes, helping some of our students kind of find their way. And one of the things that I impress upon so many people in personal branding is that, you really do have to find your why on what is driving you. And why does it matter? And why does it matter to other people outside of what and who you are? And it wasn't until I went through that second experience with Jackie and finding out my real true purpose word it was my aha moment in so many aspects of my life, professionally and personally, of really feeling true to who I am and embracing that side of me of being a guide. And that's why it's important for me to share it with others, is to say, this is kind of my role, and I wear that proudly.
I love that. I think we just made the whole podcast with that story. Kudos to the writers who helped me for digging that out. So I'm glad. I would imagine your background in PR would also have placed a strong emphasis on personal branding. How would you counsel someone who worries their personal brand will be too professional, kind of like cold, bland, lacking uniqueness?
Well, I think the cornerstone, I think you would agree with me, Danny. You've been in this world long enough also to know that there is nothing better than authenticity. You have to be who you are in order for everything to fall into place and be authentic. Personal branding does not mean you have to jump off the walls and be, this hyper person that just cannot sit still, and you're into all of these different things. That's not what personal branding is. Personal branding and branding in general is really your authentic self. It's who you are. And I think when people stop worrying about, is my brand exciting enough? Is it sexy enough? Is it going to get enough attention? I think as soon as you stop worrying about that, you start to figure out what makes it unique and why it's unique and what makes your brand stand out from others. Because, brand is multidimensional. It's not just one aspect of who you are. It is a combination of a lot of different aspects that create your brand. And I had a conversation with a friend the other day who's a luxury real estate agent, and he's thinking about going independent. He said, "I think I'm just going to name my property or name my company just my first name, and incorporated or limited or whatever it might be." And he goes, "What do you think my brand should be?" I said, "Well, you are the brand. You are the brand. That's the thing. You have to figure out what that brand means. What in lieu of everything else, you are the brand. There is nothing but that." So, finding out what it is that makes that up is where I think a lot of people get kind of waylaid on this personal brand thing. Personal branding isn't for me because I'm not super extroverted. I don't have an interesting background. I don't, I can't stand on my head and juggle at the same time. I think that it is a lot of this, as soon as you take the worry out of it, then you start to really figure out who you are and what your brand is. And that, if no one takes anything else away from this podcast episode, take that away, please. That you don't have to be this super gregarious, just outgoing, crazy, person in order to make impact with your personal brand. Your personal brand is who you are. Embrace it and build from that. And I guarantee you, everybody has a unique personal brand. They just have to take the worry out of feeling like it's too, it's not cool enough.
So kind of moving one degree away from that, definitely not to contradict with what you're saying. But one of the intentions of good personal branding is to encourage the perception of oneself as an authority in their field. Given that you typically work with college students, how do you challenge their likely imposter syndrome or feeling like they don't have enough experience to be considered an authority figure?
Okay, so first of all, you just absolutely touched on a topic that I am so incredibly motivated. My goal is to eradicate the word imposter syndrome from the campus of the University of Houston. I hear students say that they have imposter syndrome, and it absolutely sends me into orbit. Not because they feel that way, but because someone somewhere along the way has made them feel like they need to feel that way. And when I hear the term imposter syndrome from our students, the first thing I do is I define the word imposter. Now, keeping in mind that imposter syndrome has been around for the past, it's not new. It's been a concept coined for 60, past 50, 60 years. But I define the word imposter, which is a person who pretends to be something they're not for nefarious gain. And I asked my students, I said, "Are you intentionally deceiving people for nefarious gain?" And they're like, "No." They say, "No, of course not." I said, "Exactly. you're not an imposter, because imposter implies you are trying to be something you're not in order to deceive others and gain something that's not rightfully yours. You're a student. Your job is to learn. And I always say, quite honestly, we're all imposters then. If your definition is different from mine, we're all imposters because we're all learning. And, to me, anyone who makes someone feel like they're not on the same level, or they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the experience, anyone who makes someone feel that way, they're the ones who have the issue, quite honestly, because they're not being real with themselves. It's impossible to be an expert in every single aspect of the work that you do, because this world changes so rapidly. And our world changes very rapidly, in the marketing world, especially. Look at technology and the advent of AI and things that are every minute of every hour of every day, it's growing and evolving and becoming something different. My gosh, Danny, how often in the marketing world are we like, oh, we have to learn a new platform. What does it do? How does it work? What's the algorithm? Who is this for? Is this for consumer marketing, business to business? Don't know. Got to dig into it. And, that's just our world of marketing. And so for students who are in this rapidly changing environment and feel like that they're supposed to, as an intern, know it all, my goal is to help remove that burden from them. You're not supposed to know it all. No one wants you to know it all. Otherwise, you don't need to be an internship. You don't need to be an intern. You don't need to be in an internship. So it's almost like you read my brain. You read my mind, because that word imposter syndrome, I think it is dangerous. I think it's psychologically dangerous. And I think it is something that we need to eradicate from our marketplace, because it's just not true. In my opinion, it's just not a true way that you should expect to show up in this world and in your job. Because what is one of the number one skills that companies are looking for? Constant learners. And if you're not constantly learning, then you're not fitting that skill set bill, which means the imposter thing needs to go out the window.
So you don't even want to tell someone, hey, it's okay to feel imposter syndrome, because
I don't.
You should. Right. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
We need to just throw that out completely.
Absolutely. Because that erodes students' confidence so badly. And, when students come into the office, one of the things that I'm careful of not tell my students is just be confident. Well, if you're not confident, you can't just turn around and be confident, right? You have to build, confidence has to be built. And if you, in my mind, and keep it in mind, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what I'm talking about from a mental health aspect. That's not my role. That's not my area of expertise. But just being in this professional world, being a professional and seeing what the ins and the outs of corporate America really looks like, everyone's kind of making it up along the way.
People don't realize that.
Right. It's like, it's really like the Wizard of Oz and pulling the curtain back once you're there and you're working, and you realize not everybody doesn't know all the answers. And so for me, I try to not invalidate, because I don't want them to feel like their feelings aren't important or they don't matter. But I want to try to change their mindset in a way where that imposter piece of it is just not valid, especially where our students are in their career.
Love it. So I think we're 2 for 2 right now. So it's good. All right. So moving on to authenticity in marketing. So what does it mean to you to be authentic in marketing?
I believe that consumers, whether it is a consumer of messaging, if it's a consumer of images, online, social media, website, advertising, person-to-person, one-on-one interaction, audiences are not dumb. They know when something doesn't feel right, when something doesn't gel, it's just not landing. They're just not that naive. I believe that there is, that old adage, truth in advertising, right? It's still, the reason why things become old statements is because they're true. And there's nothing more true in the marketplace and in the marketing and the branding world than truth in advertising. you can tell when someone is not being really on the up and up with what the reality is. And to me, authenticity, I know that they're saying it's harder and harder to see people being authentic through, again, I go back to AI, through this, this world of artificial, you can make anything be an artistic masterpiece nowadays because all you have to do is ask ChatGPT to do it. It's getting more difficult, but I still believe that consumers are going to see through it. And they're going to ask the question, is this generated from a place of getting to someone's heart and their mind, or is this just generated through let's check a box? And I don't care if you use AI to do it or you're using your own noggin to do it. People are going to tell whether or not the audience, it's in the audience's best interest to hear it, see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, smell it. So to me, authenticity is as natural as literally just being honest and telling the truth about what's the reality. We don't live in a super realistic world nowadays. And I think people are even more suspicious when something doesn't pass the smell test. I think they're going to, people are going to question it, and they should. I'm fascinated by AI and it scares me to death at the same time. So it's like I try to dig into it and really figure out what's going on in that world and creating kind of this mythology around a lot of what people say, do, and write. And there definitely should be a healthy dose of skepticism that goes into everything that everyone says and does and writes, because I think that people are going to get better at knowing whether or not something that they're hearing or seeing or reading is really on the up and up.
I've spoken with my colleague, one in particular, a couple times, how she's married to an engineer who often harps on the capitalistic stereotype of marketing advertising. And I know in your previous life, you worked with a lot of oil and gas folk and engineers. So some people view all marketing as exploitative and disingenuous, like its only purpose is to convince people to spend money on things they don't truly want or need. How does a company avoid being viewed that way with their marketing?
I think it's the mindset that companies take when it comes to marketing and branding and communications. Without it, first of all, I believe that marketing and branding is a critical business function and it's a critical component of how businesses run. I think there is this very, jaded view of saying that marketing and branding really is not for anything more than just to make people buy things that they don't necessarily need. I think that there's a new trend. Maybe her husband should check out the rise of the anti-influencer. The people on social media who are saying, don't buy this pen. Let me tell you why. And then they go through all the reasons why you don't buy the pen that got 1 million likes the other day because the one person used it, said it's the greatest thing ever. There is this rise of the anti social media influencer to really push that truth in marketing and branding and really help people not feel like they are spending time and money on things that they shouldn't. I think there's a real difference between, now more than ever, the chasm between B2C marketing and B2B marketing, I think is so, it's greater than it ever has been, right? Because there is that rise of the influencer. There are no influencers out there who are telling people, the Kardashians are not selling pipelines. So when you get like business to business marketing, it's still this, very specific goal in mind of, selling a very specific product that another company needs. But they are out there selling different products, whether that's clothing or makeup or what have you. And to me, that chasm is so much greater that it really is about being an informed consumer. I think we have the power as the audience and the consumer to really dig in and do our research and know what it is that we need and what versus what we want. And there's a maturity gap, I think, of how do you become an informed consumer? And when I say maturity gap, I don't mean that as an age, that's not an age thing. That is just a growth and experience thing. And some people learn the hard way that they're spending money on things that they don't need. But I think that branding and marketing, there certainly are here to stay. because the marketplace is so competitive, there is no other way to really get messages out to the masses in the same basic way that advertising became king, is to get it out to the masses. And where it becomes differential is the experience of the consumer after they decide they're going to go through that buyer journey and take a chance on something. What is that experience? Was it a positive experience or was it a negative experience? That's the basics. And I think it still rings true today. We may have other competing voices that are a little bit harder to drown out than, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But at the end of the day, it's still about the experience for your consumer, whether it's in the B2B space or the B2C space. I think some of the individuals who do have more than a healthy skepticism around branding and marketing, they probably have a little bit better savings than the rest of us do. But there still is that necessary, that need to include branding and marketing as that critical business component. And I think if more companies approach branding and marketing as this is business strategy, as opposed to this is the nice to have that we need to, put forth so our banner is bigger at the conference, it's a different mindset. And when the companies who really bring it along for the ride at the seat of the table, it hits differently than the companies that are just looking at it as I want the brightest, shiniest banner and the coolest website. It will hit differently.
So another key element of communicating authenticity as a brand is actually by listening. How does a company go about doing the listening and showing its customers that it's doing so?
Actions speak louder than words. I hate to sound so pedestrian, but it's really true. I had an experience not that long ago with a hair product that I bought, and it's a small company out of Miami. And it was this dumb thing. I bought it online. I was familiar with the product. It wasn't the first time I had used it, but it was this whole free shipping for a product over a certain amount, and it was free 2-day shipping. And I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited, and it never came. I mean, it was weeks and weeks. And I called and I emailed and I called and I emailed and I called and I emailed, and no one ever responded to me. And finally, the product arrived. And I thought this is great because it's a great product, and I will never purchase from them ever again. They will never see another dime of my money. Not because it was late, but because I didn't get an answer. I didn't have someone who was willing to have a conversation. To me, it makes all the difference in the world. It's the same thing in the employment and the career process and the recruiting process. Students who are applying for the jobs and they go through the interviews and then it goes silent, and they come to us and they say, I don't know what's going on with company A. They ghosted me. It's the same thing that's left an impression in their mind of, well, the last time I applied for a job with them, I went through this process, they took my time and my effort, and then they never called me again. And that didn't feel good. So I think that we're in this world where companies really have to work overtime in answering the call of their consumers and their audience. And, I think that they will find that most people, they just want to express themselves. If the experience wasn't great, they just want to tell somebody and have someone hear it. And whether or not it changes the experience, at least that person can walk away and say, well, at least they listened to me. And I think that there's an unrealistic nature about that as well, because people will complain about anything. And, whether it's valid or not, there's a lot of these expectations not being met in the consumer space where people feel disappointed by that. And I think that it's a difficult prospect for companies to feel like that they can answer the call every single time. But there are certainly situations where when you're starting to get kind of those repeat messages from your consumers that this is not working for us and it's over and over and over again, eventually you have to address it. Otherwise, you're just going to be living in this world of the one and done consumer where they're going to buy your product, they're going to have that same experience, and then they're out. And you're constantly going to be working in that cycle.
It's funny, as a kid, and this was pre-internet days, I would always laugh, like the back of the cereal box, like said, if you had a problem, call 1-800, or like the back of like, tinfoil. Like, why would anyone ever call? But it's funny, but at least you had a number, right?
Right.
These days, we've got all these like online companies. A lot of them don't even have a number.
Right.
And it's like, ooh, maybe we should, turn back look in the past and see how maybe some companies did it and it worked. And maybe you should think about that as well.
Exactly. What's old is new again, and actually helps. It actually works. I agree. And I'm not the type of person, like, I'm not going to go on someone's Instagram page and like blow them up by saying, you stole my money. But, it does, you can kind of see how when these social media storms kind of get out of control, where people just get so frustrated, they do go onto their Instagram and they do say things that is just going to, really decrease the brand equity and really damage some of that reputation. So, there definitely is in companies' best interest to just say something and do something, even if it's the bare minimum. It's better than nothing at all.
All right, Stacey, it's time for our lightning round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention a category, and you'll let me know what comes to mind first.
Okay.
All right. Number 1, sports team.
Oh, Houston Astros.
Go Stros.
Go Stros.
We're in the running.
Oh man, they need to get together though.
All right. Musician.
Jack White.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you been a fan forever?
For a really long time. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I've seen him, I've only seen him in concert twice, but it's been 2 different incarnations. So it's been him as a solo artist and him with one of his bands, the Ray Contours. So actually, it was the last concert I saw before COVID lockdown was Ray Contours, and the first concert I saw after COVID was Jack White as an individual. So as a solo artist. So.
Wow, that's so cool. Love it. We'll have to talk more about that later.
Okay.
Food.
Type of food?
Yeah, let's do type of food.
Well, you can always get me. If someone says we're going to go eat Thai food, sushi, Vietnamese, Korean, any type of Asian cuisine, anyone who says that, I'm there. I'm going. So. Number
1 unknown Houston spot.
Ooh, I think probably it's not necessarily unknown, but underrated. I think it's the Houston Arboretum. I mean, if you ever go and the goats are there cutting the grass, it's like the best thing ever. It's just the funniest thing to be in the middle of the city and see these goats eating the grass.
Yeah, especially during the winter. Like, oh my God, it's the most beautiful place to be. And you kind of like, you can't even believe you're in Houston anymore.
Yeah, peaceful. It's peaceful. Yeah.
Love that. And then finally, fiction book.
Let's see. Well, my favorite fiction is I like a lot of kind of paranormal, but also crime novels. So my absolute favorite fiction book has been The Alienist by Caleb Carr. I mean, it kind of has every aspect of it, of both kind of that scary thriller horror genre. It's also a period piece because it takes place in early 1900s New York City. So kind of Jack the Ripper style, if you're not familiar with The Alienist by Caleb Carr.
So Stacey, where can listeners learn more about you and the university?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, as is the rest of the Bauer College of Business, the Rockwell Career Center, which is where I am. We're all very active on LinkedIn. Please check us out. Check me out on LinkedIn because I'm constantly posting and opining about something that I hope is impactful to somebody in this world. But yeah, that's the easiest place to find me and to find us.
Well, Stacey, thank you so much for being a guest on the Digital Marketing Mentor. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more marketing mentor magic. See you next time.